Hello everyone, and welcome to Retro Brick Reviews, where today we'll be taking a look at LEGO Star Wars The Mandalorian, set 75312, Boba Fett's Starship. The set includes 593 pieces, 2 minifigures, and retails for about $50 in the United States. It depicts Boba Fett's iconic starship, the Firespray, though it's more commonly known by the name given to it by Jango Fett, his father, the Slave One. And without any further ado, let's start the review, starting with the minifigures. Starting off, we have what for many people is the highlight of the set, the brand new Boba Fett figure, based on his current appearance in The Mandalorian and the Book of Boba Fett. And this figure, in my opinion, looks absolutely fantastic, save for one very noticeable flaw with it. And that's actually what we're starting with, because it's in regards to the helmet. Specifically, the color is decidedly too light for this variation of Boba Fett after he repaints his armor. It should be a much darker green, where here LEGO stuck with the sand green color that they've been using on Boba Fett figures from Empire and Jedi for a decade now. And the reasoning behind this does make sense, because they do need to have a second darker color of green for the cheek highlights, so that has to be dark green, and sand green is the only other muted green color LEGO had, so I understand why they did this, because otherwise the armor would look too vibrant for what it looks like in universe. That said, I personally probably still would have gone with just the normal green color. Even if it would have appeared too vibrant, it would have felt more accurate to this version of the character. But nonetheless, color aside, I do think that the new print for the helmet is very nice. Very cleaned up compared to a lot of other Boba figures. And you can also see that you have the darker stripes along the side of the helmet. You have the T-visor with the red around it. Yeah, it's just a very nice, classy look, just maybe a bit too light in color. It does feature the standard LEGO piece that they've been using for years for the Rangefinder, which can be moved down if you want to have Boba like he's looking through it. You can see that around the back he has his standard jetpack piece, again in sand green, and the same reasoning applies mostly, although seeing as how they do have dark green for the armor on the front of the torso, I think they could have made the jetpack dark green as well, and it wouldn't have looked awkward when put next to the helmet, even if they did keep the helmet sand green. But anyway, you can also see that he does have his blaster at the front. This is the same build for Boba's blaster that they've been doing for a fair few years now, and I don't know if it's really accurate at the moment, because I don't believe Boba still has this gun. I believe it was lost during the battle on the sail barge in Return of the Jedi. In Book of Boba Fett, he just used a pistol. So, not really sure what that's about, but if we remove that, and also some of his other gear, while I do really like what they've done for the helmet, color aside, it's not how I'm going to primarily display the figure, because if we take all of that off, we have this absolutely fantastic Boba Fett head print underneath. This just looks flawless. It's essentially just an aged-up version of the Clone Trooper head they put out in 2020, and it looks incredible. You have this very aggressive expression, which fits the character, I feel. And then you also have the scars on his face from his time in the Sarlacc pit. Those also all look really nice. And you just have a couple more around the back. Taking a look at his torso, you can see that it is similar in a lot of ways to previous designs, since it is the same armor, just repainted. However, you do also have at the top the showing of some of his black cloak hanging over his armor, which is a nice touch. Going down to the legs, you can see the continuation of that cloak going down to about his knees, where you do have his knee pads, complete with the little missile launchers on the sides, which is a very nice detail, and just a very fun thing that they put in The Mandalorian for Boba Fett. Turning to the side, though, you have arm printing. Fantastic. It's always great to get another Boba Fett figure with arm printing, especially finally one that's just regularly available for people to get, and I think it looks really nice. On the left, you have a yellow shoulder pad with a couple of tubes leading into one of his gauntlets. And then on the other side, you have his flamethrower, and then you have the other shoulder pad with the mythosaur on it, which is a very nice inclusion to have. And then around the back, you can just see the back of his armor plating, which is normally covered up by the jetpack, but this is what it looks like underneath. So overall, I think LEGO did a fantastic job with this new Boba Fett minifigure. I think it is one of the best LEGO Star Wars minifigures of the last few years. And yeah, I think it's a great inclusion in the set, and definitely a good reason to buy the set if you're interested. Fantastic job here on LEGO's part. Our second figure is not exclusive, but still very exciting. It's Dingarin the Mandalorian, based on his Beskar armor from the series. Starting with the accessories, you can see that he does have a standard blaster pistol, as well as a large Beskar spear, both of which are accurate accessories for this point in the series. But removing those so we can get a better look at the figure itself, this is a fairly common minifigure at this point. This is one of 5 sets to include this exact figure of Dingarin, but I can't say I entirely mind, because this is a really fantastically done figure on LEGO's part, so much like Boba Fett, it's one that I'm glad is readily available for people to easily get. Starting off, you can just see that on the torso and legs, you have so much metallic detailing for his armor, and that all looks fantastic, with the mismatched knee pads, some details on his belts, and then of course the chest plate at the front looks just amazing. And you can also see that you have some dark gray details on the dark brown plastic, just to represent the jumpsuit he's wearing underneath of his armor, and I think all that looks great. What looks even better, though, and what really helps this figure to stand out from the crowd, is that much like Boba in this set, Din also gets arm printing. It's really great to see that in the last couple years, LEGO has really started embracing arm printing for more and more Star Wars characters, because it really just helps them shine so much more. On this arm, you can see Din's flamethrower gauntlet, as well as his shoulder pad with detailing for the Mudhorn, the signet, which is very nice to have, because of course Din is the leader of Clan Mudhorn, even if it is a clan of 2. And going around to the other arm, you can see that his other shoulder pad is more basic, but his other gauntlet has the launcher for the whistling birds, which is a very nice, just another very nice inclusion. A lot of thought went into this figure, which is very nice, because I feel as though with Din, maybe not with Boba, but with Din, they could have gotten away with just duplicating the same print on both arms, but they didn't. They actually did it completely unique on both sides, which is just fantastic on LEGO's part. They really outdid themselves with the prints on Din. And then around the back, you can just see more of that armor detailing. Obviously not as detailed, because it's the back, so there just isn't as much to show, but it is still very nice. And I also like the little nougat stripe there toward the bottom. That said, while I've spent so much time talking up this figure, I've been exclusively referring to everything from the neck down. and that's because, in my opinion, everything from the neck up is unfortunately pretty disappointing. Starting with the helmet, it is the same helmet they've used with all of the Beskar Mando figures, and in my opinion, this does not work at all, because it's just cast in LEGO's flat silver, and the only printing is for the visor. And starting off, I don't think this works, just because the visor needs to be thinner. They used the same exact design here that they use for other Mandalorians, such as Boba Fett, and Din's visor on his helmet, the T-visor, is much thinner, so this just doesn't look like him. Secondly, his helmet also has a very notable ridge up at the top, so if they weren't going to make a new helmet mold, they should have printed that. But I think the most notable thing is just there's no definition anywhere. I think they needed some kind of printing for his cheeks, like how you had on Boba, how you have the dark green. I think you needed some metallic silver to go to edge around the cheeks and the top of the T-visor to really make this design work, and it just doesn't. And compared to the very nice metallic prints on the torso, legs, and arms, the flat silver helmet just looks really poor in my opinion. I feel as though if LEGO were to put their all into making a new design, I think the best way to do it would be to have the helmet piece itself be in gunmetal gray, and then print on metallic silver in the areas I mentioned. But they didn't do that, and as a result, the helmet looks pretty lackluster on this figure. But if you're interested in lackluster, you haven't seen anything yet, because if we take off the helmet, nothing. Keep in mind that this set came out a full 18 months after Din Djarin's face was first revealed in the finale of The Mandalorian Season 1, and also that according to the box art, this set is based on an episode of the show in which Din takes off his helmet and we see his face, so there is absolutely no excuse for his face not being here, especially since the other two Mandalorian sets that came out at the same time were based on the two other episodes of the series where he takes off his helmet. There are 3 episodes where he takes off his helmet. They picked sets based on one for each of those 3 episodes, and none of them does he have a face print. That is very disappointing and lazy on LEGO's part. Just, yeah. Not really dislike the plain black head, really dislike the helmet. I absolutely love the torso and legs, though. So overall, it still definitely averages to be a good figure, but it could be a lot better. And hopefully at some point LEGO will update the helmet and give him a face print, but it so far hasn't happened with the 2022 winter set that includes this figure of Din, so maybe for Season 3? There are 2 major builds to this set, where we have Boba Fett Starship itself, but then on the left we also have a small transport speeder, so let's take a quick look at that first. You have a couple of lights at the front, and much like a fair amount of speeders of this type in the Star Wars universe, the driver just stands at the front and would grasp onto these lever pieces. So we can just put Din here, and imagine that he's grabbing the levers up there. Then you have a ladder, and that is covering up our cargo, which is this carbonite brick, which features a Gamorrean encased in carbonite, which isn't anything we see in the series, but it does make some sense. And I really do like that they included that, because even if this isn't based on The Empire Strikes Back, the ship holding carbonite is just an iconic element of it, so that's a great thing to have. We will come back to both the carbonite brick and the speeder later on, because there is another element of the set that features them. But now moving on to the main build of the Slave 1 Starship itself. This is an interesting one, because, of course, this is far from the first version of this ship LEGO's done. There have been many. But this one scaled things down a fair amount, where the last version was about a third larger than this is right now, and came with about 1,000 pieces. This set is about 600. So definitely a fair amount smaller here, but despite that, LEGO managed to incorporate a great amount of detail and a great amount of playability as well. Starting off, just looking around, you can see that it has very much the Slave 1 shape, with the large red dish at the bottom, coming into the gray and green main chassis with the nice slight upward slant here. I am very impressed that LEGO was able to incorporate that at the correct angle on such a small set. You have the blasters here at the end. You have the winglets as well. And then here you have the cargo ramp hold. And that opens up, and there is room inside to put the carbonite block. So that's really nice, and you can just close that up, and it is all the way in there. Continuing our loop around, you can see that you have some stickers on each side. You have these areas as well where the winglets connect into. And yeah, it's very impressive how much detail LEGO was able to pack into this. It is not quite on the same level as the 2019 Slave 1 set, which, in my opinion, was essentially just a smaller UCS set. This isn't to that level, but this is still very nice, and I'd say an above-average level of detail for a $50 Star Wars set. I mean, it's 600 pieces for that price, so you know that you're getting a good amount of detail here. But moving on, of course, while this is the Slave 1's landed position, it is much more iconic in its flight position, where you take it up like this, and as we do, you can see that the winglets actually move with gravity, so they follow the ship itself. That is very nice, it's very neat, and I'm really glad that LEGO was able to include that. That said, if we want to display it like this, we can't really just lean it down because it'll fall back. So, if you want to display that, normally in all previous versions, you'd basically be out of luck and you just have to lean it up against something and hope it didn't fall over. But this time around, LEGO actually thought of that, because if we go back to the cart that they included, look at that. What you can do is you can lift up the ladder, and at the back of the Slave 1, where you can see that there is a lot of good detailing here for the engines. These are actually fairly accurate, and there is one more feature on the back that we'll look at in a minute, but you have this sand green tile, and if you just slot the ladder onto that, you can display the Starship standing up. And in my opinion, this is just a really fantastic inclusion with the set. It definitely makes that little speeder much more worthwhile and takes it from a neat side build to something that is really fantastic and, in my opinion, really makes this set. And now that the ship is in its more iconic position, we can take a look at some of the other details, such as the front of the ship, where you can see that you do have the nose, which is perhaps a bit thin, but I'm still a fan of how it turned out. You can see that there are a couple of stickers going down it to continue the detailing of the dark green toward the center. And here you can see the little repeating blasters, which can be angled up and down, but they are a bit fragile, so I would be careful with those. And then here we have our firing mechanisms for this particular set, where we just have a couple of stud shooters, which I'm personally fine with, because it would have been really difficult to try to incorporate any other features in here without without messing up the look of the ship, so I'm perfectly fine with that. And how these work is you just push down on the little trigger, and I'll try to catch it, and the stud flies off to never be seen again. Very nice. That said, there are a couple more features to look at here as we continue to twirl around. First off, I mentioned this little Technic area back here, and that is actually a handle, where if we take this off the stand and we just pull up in here, this Technic bit comes out, and now we actually have a handle to fly around the Slave 1 Starship as we go around our bounty hunting duties. So that's a really nice feature to include. It definitely helps play because I suppose you could grab from down here, but it's just not as satisfying, and you really can't grab from the nose because it's definitely somewhat fragile. So yeah, I like that they included a handle. It's not as necessary as it was with the 2019 version, where it was completely essential, but I do think it was definitely a very good thing to include here. That said, there is one more feature for the Slave 1, and that is, of course, the cockpit, where you just have this standard canopy piece, and if we look inside, you can see a control panel, but unlike previous versions, there clearly isn't any gyroscopic seat feature. And unfortunately, that is something that did have to be sacrificed for the smaller scale of the set, as they just couldn't fit that in the way they could with the past larger models. However, you can still seat him in both positions, where you have some studs toward the front for if you want him piloting in its landed position. You can just close it up and he's in there while it's landed. And if you want to have it in flight, you have a couple of open studs here at the front. We can just affix him to, close it up, put it back in flight position, and there we go. That is Boba Fett's Starship. A really great LEGO Star Wars set that I think they did a great job on, as I try to move it back a bit and almost knock it off. But, yeah, I think that this is a really fantastic set. I think did a great job at scaling down this very iconic ship for people who just don't have the money to spend over $100 on this craft or LEGO sets in general. So, yeah, I think this is a really fantastically done set. It still has a great level of detail, a great amount of play. And before we finish up, let's take a look at the box, the instruction manual, and the extra pieces, and then we'll wrap up this review. The set has this very squarish box that uses the 2019 to 2021 LEGO Star Wars box design with the white greebling and the black logo. Personally, I really don't like this look for the packaging, but I do like how in the top right you do have a picture of Dingarin to specify that this is a Mandalorian-themed set. I like that they've started doing that by putting different characters in the corner to reflect the era the set's based on. On the left we have our information, and then in the center you have a big image of the Starship in action, flying above the forest planet from Season 2, Episode 7 of The Mandalorian, which sets the scene of the set. It makes sense, since that was the episode Boba's new armor paint job debuted in. And then in the bottom right, you have pictures of our two figures, and you can note that the box does not show Din and the speeder on the front main image. However, if we turn around to the back, you can see the ship in landed position, as well as the two figures, our speeder, and then all of the different play features we just looked at. And you can also see that this is a push-tab box, although personally I just cut it open with a knife because the push tabs are never very good with LEGO sets in my opinion. They always end up breaking the box in unfortunate ways, so it's better to just cut it. That said, Nice box. Now let's look at the instructions. Here's the instruction manual for the set. The set has 4 numbered bags and comprises... how many? It comprises 139 steps of building to complete the set. And then at the back, you have an advertisement for some of the LEGO Mandalorian Star Wars sets. On the right, you have an advertisement showing the minifigures from all of the Summer 2021 sets, including Mandalorian, Clone Wars, and Bad Batch. And then here you just have an advertisement for LEGO Star Wars The Skywalker Saga, coming out 2022, maybe, hopefully. And then at the back you have Win Robot. I miss Win Kid. And that's the manual, so now let's finish up by looking at the extra pieces. We can sort the spare parts into 3 categories. Starting here, we just have the 4 spare studs that are included for the stud shooter. Then here, you can see a collection of accessory pieces, because Boba's Rangefinder originates from a Clone Trooper accessory pack that includes 4 visors and 4 rangefinders. So LEGO including the rangefinder for Boba means that we have 4 leftover visors and 3 leftover rangefinders. As for the extra parts proper, they're nothing exceptionally exciting, but you do get a good amount of them for the size of this set, and some of the nicer ones include this stamp piece in light bluish gray, a fully black lever, this 1x1 with a bar coming off the end, and I will never say no to getting a trans orange stud with a hole in the center. That's just always a nice part, and one I certainly enjoy. So those are the extra parts, so now I think it's time to wrap up this review. So overall, for $50, would I recommend LEGO Star Wars Set 75312 Boba Fett Starship? If you couldn't tell by this review, the answer is a definite yes, with perhaps the one exception being if you own a prior version of the Slave 1, then you might not feel the need for the set. But in my opinion, this is the second best version of this ship LEGO has ever made. I still think that the 20th anniversary version they put out in 2019 is the best overall, just because it has a higher level of detail. Again, basically UCS quality, and then this is number 2. That said, the actual Ultimate Collector Series Slave 1, I would say is the 3rd best. I just don't like the color blocking as much, and I think that the dark red bottom is really rough on that one. As opposed to this set, which honestly I think the shaping of the bottom is done even better than on the 2019 set. So anyway, the point is, if you have any version of the slate, if you have the 2019 version, which I have that and this one, then I could see skipping the set just because you do already have a very good version of it. If you have any other version of the Slave 1, I would recommend this as a not very expensive upgrade. And if you don't have any version of the ship, then obviously I would recommend picking this up, because it is a great ship from the Star Wars franchise. And yes, that said, while I do really like the minifigures in the set, they really can't be a big boon for it, because, again, this Din figure comes in several other sets, and Boba himself will likely be popping up again in the Book of Boba Fett sets that are coming in 2022, later this year. So, the minifigures are a draw in terms of how nice they are, but not necessarily in terms of exclusivity, so this is primarily a set to get for the build. And in that respect, I think it is totally worth the price of admission. I think LEGO did a fantastic job with this one, and I highly recommend it. So, thank you all so much for watching this review video, and for right now, this is Retro Brick Reviews, signing off.